Have you ever witnessed a moment when every second could define between life and death? Now imagine this happening to a helpless bear cub, lost and trapped in a dark cave in the middle of a relentless blizzard. The intense cold cuts like blades, the winds howl like invisible predators, and loneliness echoes through the frozen trees. The little bear, scared and powerless, cries in despair, his lament mixing with the sound of the storm that swallows everything around. He knows that if he is not found soon, his chances of survival are diminishing by the moment. But what happened next was simply unbelievable. Animal rescue stories are always moving, but this one, in particular, will challenge everything you've ever heard about survival, courage, and compassion. A defenseless cub, trapped in the ice with no way out. But the real surprise is not just his fight for life, but who showed up to save him. Can you imagine? Often in nature, we expect predators to be ruthless, that the law of the strongest will always prevail. But there are rare and inexplicable moments that make us rethink everything we know about animal instinct and the connection between living beings. In the white wilderness of Alaska, where temperatures can drop to deadly levels, every life must fight the forces of nature. Grizzly bears and black bears roam these wild lands in search of food, but an alone cub is an easy target for the dangers of the forest. Maybe he got away from his mother during the storm. Maybe he got stuck while looking for shelter. What matters is that he was vulnerable, defenseless, and on the brink of a cruel fate. But against all odds, something happened that night. Now close your eyes for a moment and imagine. You are walking through the snow, feeling the cold air burning your skin, when suddenly, a sound cuts through the silence. A weak moan, a cry that cannot be ignored. Your heart races. What to do? The forest is full of dangers. Getting closer could mean facing an angry adult bear. But at the same time, ignoring this cry for help can condemn an innocent life. That's the brutal reality of wildlife. And someone that night had to make an impossible decision. What happened next was so surprising that no one would believe it if there were no records. After all, who could have expected that the savior of this bear cub would not be a human, but rather something completely unexpected, a true miracle of nature? But before I reveal who or what saved this bear cub from a cruel fate, I want to know, what would you do in this situation? Would you risk your own safety to try to help? Leave your comment below, because this story will leave you speechless. Here on the channel, we tell exciting stories of animal rescue, moments of overcoming unlikely connections between humans and wildlife. If you love this type of content and want to continue following incredible stories like this, sign up now and turn on notifications. This way, you don't miss any exciting stories and also help us to continue bringing you impactful content. But back to the story. The blizzard became more and more intense, and the little bear could barely move. The cold drained his strength. The darkness of the cave was suffocating. He was about to give up until something unbelievable had happened. Something no one could have predicted. And whoever showed up at that pivotal moment will challenge everything we know about nature. Get ready, because this twist will surprise you. The biting Alaskan wind roared like a hungry beast, lashing the white, unforgiving landscape. Thick snow covered everything, turning the forest into a frozen maze where every step could be treacherous. The temperature plummeted to deadly levels, freezing even the breath in the air. It was one of those days when nature itself seemed to test the limits of survival, where any living being had to fight against intense cold, hunger, and absolute loneliness. In the middle of this icy vastness, lost between snow-capped mountains and frozen rivers, there was a dark and deep cave, a natural trap for any unsuspecting creature. And it was exactly there that a little bear cub found himself trapped, with no way out, no strength, no hope. His fur was not yet dense enough to protect him from the extreme cold. His trembling paws sank into the snow, and his cries were swallowed by the wind. He was alone, completely defenseless. The Alaska region is one of the most hostile places on the planet. During winter, temperatures can drop to 45 degrees C, freezing anything exposed for too long. Here, only the strongest survive. those who have learned to face the brutality of wild nature. You brown bears and the American black bears inhabit this land, hunting, fishing, and wandering for miles in search of food. But a puppy alone? He doesn't have a chance. Without his mother to protect him, he became an easy target for predators, or even worse, the merciless cold that kills slowly. But how did he end up there? How did such a small cub become separated from its mother in such a dangerous environment? Storms in Alaska are unpredictable and can turn a peaceful hike into a nightmare. Perhaps he was following his mother and, in an oversight, he distanced himself. Perhaps a sudden blizzard covered his trail, preventing her from finding him again. Or who knows, a predator surprised them, forcing the mother to flee, without being able to return for him. As the cub trembled inside the cave, fighting exhaustion, something moved in the forest. Heavy footsteps broke the hardened snow, a sound that mixed with the howl of the wind. But what was coming? Could it be a wolf sniffing out easy prey? A hunter exploring the region? Or perhaps something even more unexpected? And this is where the story takes a turn surprising. Who, or what, appeared at that crucial moment challenges everything we know about wild nature. But before continuing, I want to hear from you. If you were in the middle of a blizzard, alone, and you heard a bear cub crying, what would you do? Would you try to help? Or would he continue on his way, fearing danger? Leave your comment, because this story still has many twists and turns that will leave your jaw dropping. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it now. Here we tell heartwarming stories of animal rescues, unbelievable wildlife moments, and amazing human-animal connections. Don't miss the next stories. Activate the bell to be notified as soon as a new video comes out. Now get ready, because what happened next was something that no one could predict. In the piercing silence of the night, amid the howling of the wind and the distant sound of the trees bending under the weight of the snow, a faint, harrowing sound echoed through the cave. A short, broken moan, almost imperceptible to anyone who wasn't paying attention. But it was there. It was a call of desperation, a cry for help suffocated by the cold and darkness. Something small, fragile, struggled to be heard in the middle of the icy immensity. The sound repeated, this time weaker. Something inside fought to resist, but the strength was quickly running out. Whoever or whatever was trapped in that cave knew that every second counted. The intense cold drained any trace of heat, damp soaked into the bones, and snow blocked the only exit. The bear cub, all alone, had become a hostage to his own weakness. The cave was dark, deep, and treacherous. Its rough stone walls were uneven, with sharp stalactites hanging from the ceiling and small, narrow corridors that led to dead ends. Inside, the darkness was absolute. Anyone who ventured inside without lighting could easily lose their way and never find the exit. And even worse, no one knew what else could be hidden inside. The bear cub had crawled into that stone hole looking for shelter. Survival instinct had led him there, seeking refuge from the biting cold of the blizzard. But now he was trapped, without strength, without food, without the protection of his mother. Her small eyes blinked slowly, each blink longer than the last. Sleep was coming. Not a normal sleep, but that treacherous sleep of extreme cold, the one that comes like a soft hug, convincing the mind to give up. Outside, the snow continued to fall, each flake piling up over the cave entrance, making the exit even further away. The cold was unforgiving, and the storm wouldn't let up anytime soon. The cub was at a critical point. If no one found him soon, there would be nothing left to be done. But there was something even scarier about that situation. An invisible risk, a silent danger. And that danger could be watching everything closely. What no one knew, what no one could have predicted, was that the mother bear might be nearby. The maternal instinct of bears is one of the most powerful forces in nature. When a cub is in danger, a mother can face any threat without hesitation. An alert bear can become extremely aggressive, attacking anything that poses a risk to her cub. But where was she? Had it been driven away by the storm? Would you be outside wandering through the snow, tirelessly searching for your little one? Or even worse, had something happened to her? What if the cave wasn't just a temporary shelter, but a death trap? The weight of the snow accumulated on the edges of the entrance could cause a collapse at any moment. Any stronger vibration, any wrong movement, and everything could collapse, sealing the puppy's fate forever. Tension was in the air. Time was running against him. And there, in that cold, merciless darkness, the little bear breathed heavily, each sigh turning into a small white cloud that disappeared into the frigid air. He was on the edge of an invisible boundary, between survival and surrender. But then something happened. A different sound cut through the air. Steps, movements in the snow. Someone, or something, was approaching. The cub raised its head, its small eyes wide, trying to see beyond the darkness. His ears caught the noise, his heart raced, but he no longer had the strength to run away. And it was at that moment that everything changed. But before I continue this unbelievable story, I want to know what you think happened next. Did the mother bear show up? Or something even more surprising? Write "mystery in the cave" in the comments if you are curious to know the outcome of this unbelievable story. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, click the sign up button right now. Here you'll find the most heartwarming animal rescue stories, awe-inspiring wildlife moments, and connections that challenge everything we know about nature. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next episode, because this story is far from over. The wind was blowing stronger and stronger, whipping the snow against the cave entrance and making visibility almost zero. The cold penetrated to the bone, and each gust brought with it a piercing howl, as if the forest itself mourned the fate of that little bear cub. The faint moan that echoed in the darkness of the cave was a call of desperation, a last plea for help before it was too late. But who or what was approaching? Could it be a predator attracted by the cub's vulnerability? Or perhaps his mother coming back for him, fierce and desperate? The protagonist, standing there, felt the weight of the decision he needed to make. He knew that if he entered that cave, he could be putting himself at risk. An alone cub usually meant the mother was nearby, and an alert bear was one of the most dangerous animals in the wild. But what if the mother never came back? What if that little being was completely alone, condemned to die of cold, hunger, or easy prey for any other animal that roamed the region? The dilemma was real. Logic told him to stay away, not interfere with nature, not take unnecessary risks. But the heart screamed something else. There was something about that cry, that trembling, weakening sound, that awakened a primal instinct of compassion, something that transcended the barrier between man and animal. That cub wasn't just a lost wild creature. At that moment, he was a life about to be extinguished, a defenseless being who just needed a chance to survive. Taking a deep breath, the protagonist made his decision. He couldn't just turn around and walk away, not while there was still time. Slowly approaching the cave entrance, he had to be careful not to sink into the soft snow that covered the ground. Every step needed to be calculated, every movement silent. Survival instinct dictated that any unexpected noise could alert a predator, or worse, trigger a partial collapse of the cave, burying everything inside. When he finally reached the entrance, a gust of cold, damp air came from within the rock shelter. The darkness was absolute, swallowing any trace of light. The cub's moan was now more audible, a piercing sound that seemed to come from the depths of the cave. The protagonist strained his eyes to see better, but the dense darkness made everything indistinguishable. He would need to go in. His heart raced as he took the first step into the cave. The cold seemed even more intense inside, and the ground was unstable, covered with a thin layer of ice. He knew he couldn't make any sudden movements. If the puppy was too scared, it might try to run and hide in an even more inaccessible place. Or worse, he could believe he was facing a threat and react with his small, sharp teeth, trying to defend himself. With each step, the protagonist felt the humidity in the air increase. The cave was not as small as it looked from the outside. There were narrow corridors that led to unknown places, shadows that moved according to the dim light that entered through the main opening. Then finally, he saw him. The little bear was huddled in a corner, its thick fur covered in snow and ice, its eyes wide and full of fear. His body was shaking violently, not just from the cold, but from the terror of a stranger's presence. He couldn't understand that this man was there to help. All he knew was that he was helpless, alone, and vulnerable. The protagonist felt a tightness in his chest. The cub was smaller than he expected, probably just a few weeks old. Its paws were buried in the hardened snow, and its movements were slow and uncoordinated. He was already weak, perhaps having not eaten for days. If he wasn't rescued soon, he wouldn't be able to resist much longer. But how can you get closer without scaring him even more? Slowly lowering himself, the protagonist extended his hand, trying to show that he posed no threat. The cub backed away, pressing itself against the stone wall of the cave. His small eyes were fixed on that strange being that invaded his space. The fear was evident, but something in his eyes also showed exhaustion. He no longer had the strength to run away. The protagonist's breath came in white clouds in front of him as he spoke, his voice low and calm, trying to convey reassurance. It didn't matter that the cub didn't understand the words. The tone was what mattered. The soft sound, the controlled rhythm, like a soothing melody amidst the chaos of the storm outside. Little by little, the little bear began to relax, his tremors slightly lessening, but he still hesitated, torn between fear and a desperate need for help. The protagonist knew he needed to act quickly. He looked around, analyzing the situation. The cave entrance was still open, but the accumulated snow was beginning to block it. If he waited any longer, he could end up trapped in there with the puppy. But simply taking the little bear in your arms could scare him into reacting, so he made a bold decision. He slowly removed his backpack, opened the zipper as carefully as possible, and took out a thick blanket that he carried for emergencies. He knew that human heat wouldn't be enough to save the cub, but if he could wrap him up, he could at least prevent the cold from draining what little energy he still had left. Moving slowly, he got even closer, keeping his gaze low so as not to appear threatening. The cub watched him warily, but didn't move. It was the decisive moment. With a quick but precise movement, he threw the blanket over the little bear and wrapped it carefully, bringing it close to his chest. The cub struggled slightly but had no strength to resist. His body was too weak. Hunger and cold had stolen all his energy. The protagonist felt the fragile heat of that small being against his own body and knew he had made the right choice. Now, he needed to get out of there. But then, a different sound echoed through the cave. A heavy noise, something moving in the snow outside. The protagonist's heart raced. He slowly turned towards the entrance, the puppy still wrapped in his arms. The darkness prevented him from seeing anything clearly, but he felt it. Something, or someone, was outside. The surrounding air became even more tense. Adrenaline coursed through his body, his mind trying to process all the possibilities. He had to act quickly, but any rash move could be his last. Now, everything depended on what, or who, was waiting for him outside. If you've made it this far and are as involved in this story as I am, I want you to comment "Impossible Rescue" here in the comments. It helps me know you're following along and looking forward to what comes next. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do it right now. Here we tell the most moving stories of wildlife rescues, breathtaking moments, and inexplicable connections between humans and animals. Activate the bell and stay up to date with the next episodes because what comes next is simply unbelievable. Time was running out. The bear cub, fragile and defenseless, could barely keep its eyes open. His body, too small to withstand the extreme cold, was on the verge of collapse. Every second in that cave was a greater risk. The protagonist knew that if he didn't get out of there immediately, the little bear wouldn't survive. But something inside him told him the situation was about to get worse. The air became heavier. An eerie silence took over the environment, broken only by the rustle of snow falling from the cave entrance. Small cracks began to echo off the stone walls, as if something was about to move, to give way under the weight of the accumulated snow. The survival instinct triggered an alert in the protagonist. The cave was unstable. He hugged the cub to his chest, feeling his body shaking from the cold. The little bear's breathing was weak, irregular. He couldn't wait any longer. I had to get out of there now. But as soon as he took the first step toward the exit, a deafening sound made his heart race. With a bang that reverberated throughout the cave, a portion of the ceiling gave way. Fragments of ice and stone fell, spraying snow and dust everywhere. The impact shook the ground beneath his feet, and the protagonist stumbled, falling to one knee as he tried to protect the cub. The little bear let out a faint moan, barely audible amidst the chaos. The cave entrance began to close before their eyes. Large blocks of ice rolled inward, blocking the exit inch by inch. The collapse wasn't complete, but if he didn't act quickly, they would be trapped inside, and that meant a certain death sentence for the puppy. The adrenaline kicked in. The protagonist stood up impulsively, holding the little bear more firmly. The cub's weight wasn't great, but the tension of the situation made everything more difficult. He needed to run, but every step was treacherous. The ground was covered in a layer of soft snow mixed with broken ice, and any wrong move could mean a time-consuming fall. Another crack cut the air. The ceiling creaked again, as if the cave was warning that it could no longer support the accumulated weight. The protagonist took a quick look at the exit. There was still a narrow space, a gap small enough for him and the cub to fit through, but he needed to get there before it was too late. Forcing his body against the biting cold, he charged forward. The wind blowing from outside entered through the remaining opening, mixing snow into the air and making visibility even worse. The puppy was becoming increasingly limp in his arms, and this made him quicken his pace even more. A few meters from the exit, a last bang made everything shake. The cave gave way once and for all. A new flurry of snow fell from the ceiling, partially blocking the path. The protagonist no longer had time to think. He just acted. In a desperate movement, he used his own body to protect the cub as he advanced through the narrow space that still remained. Snow fell around him, covering his back and making every step an extreme effort. The cold was overwhelming, burning his exposed skin, and the weight of the ice pushed against his body as if it wanted to trap him there forever. But he didn't stop. With the last push, he managed to cross the opening before the snow sealed the entrance once and for all. He felt the shock of freezing air hitting his face, his lungs filling from the biting wind outside. He was outside the cave, and, most importantly, so does the puppy. He fell to his knees in the soft snow, panting, the cub still wrapped in the blanket. The little bear didn't move. Fear took over the protagonist for a moment. Could the cold have been too much? Had he arrived too late? But then a slight movement, a small warm breath against his chest. The cub was still alive, weak, but alive. Before he could recover from the tension, a new noise made him freeze in place. It wasn't the cave this time, it wasn't the wind. It was something more. Heavy footsteps crushing the snow, a serious, deep sound coming from the darkness of the forest. The protagonist's heart raced. He knew exactly what it could be. Something, or someone, was watching. The snow continued to fall gently, erasing the tracks left by the cub and its mother as they disappeared into the vastness of the forest. The protagonist remained there for a few more moments, feeling the weight of that moment engraved in his memory. He knew he would hardly ever see that little bear again, but something inside him said that meeting would change his life forever. Stories like this make us realize how strong the connection between living beings can be, even when everything seems lost. And now, I want to hear from you. What moved you most about this journey? Comment "heart racing" to show together the impact of this incredible story. If this experience touched you, show your support with a like. That's it, subscribe to the channel to continue following moments as exciting as this one. And stay tuned, because what comes next is even more surprising. The silence of the forest was absolute, interrupted only by the sound of the protagonist's heavy breathing and the light rustle of the wind that whistled between the snow-covered trees. The bear cub lay motionless in his arms, curled up, its small, fragile body shaking slightly, its breathing short and ragged. But he was still alive. The rescue had been a success, or so it seemed. And then, that sound came. Serious, deep, intense. A muffled sound of footsteps crunching through the snow, slowly approaching. The kind of sound that instantly triggers the survival instinct. The kind of sound that makes your heart race and your body freeze from pure reflex. The protagonist didn't move. His brain frantically processed all the possibilities, but none of them were comforting. He was in wild country, surrounded by bitter cold and the unforgiving darkness of night. I couldn't see who or what was approaching, but I could feel it. Something big, something strong, something that had found him. Instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew that any rash move could seal his fate. Instead, he remained still, holding the cub even more tightly to his chest. The little bear did not react to the imminent danger, perhaps too exhausted to even notice. The tension in the air was suffocating. Then, among the shadows of the forest, he appeared. First, just a figure, a dark silhouette against the white snow, moving with frightening precision. But as the protagonist's eyes adjusted, the shock was inevitable. It wasn't a wolf, nor was it another common predator in that region. It was a bear. But not just any bear. The creature that emerged from the darkness was immense. His powerful muscles moved beneath his thick, dark fur, and his eyes, shining in the pale moonlight, carried a primal intelligence, something that transcended pure animal instinct. He stopped there, a few meters away, his nostrils flaring as he caught the puppy's scent. The protagonist felt his entire body stiffen. The only thing more dangerous than a grizzly bear in the woods was a brown bear protecting her cub. But could this be the baby's mother? Time seemed to have slowed down. The adult bear was still there, not moving forward, not attacking, just watching. His dark eyes fixed on the protagonist, and for a moment, he felt like he was being evaluated. The strong wind blew between them, carrying with it an almost palpable tension. What would happen next? He didn't know. It could be a massive attack. It could be the end of everything. But then, something unexpected happened. The bear advanced slowly, but her behavior was not aggressive. His steps were firm but not in a hurry. His breathing was deep but controlled. And then, without hesitation, she did something no one would believe. She bent down. The scene was surreal. The huge animal, capable of tearing anything apart with a single strike of its sharp claws, was now bowing down before him. It wasn't a gesture of submission, but it wasn't a threat either. It was recognition. The protagonist felt a shiver run down his spine. His heart was beating fast, but not just out of fear. It was something deeper, something inexplicable. The connection between human and animal, between predator and prey, between two species that, for a moment, seemed to understand each other. The bear raised her head and let out a low sound, a short growl, almost as if she were calling her cub. It was at that moment that the little bear began to move. With difficulty, he raised his head, his half-closed eyes blinking slowly. He recognized that sound. He knew that smell. The protagonist didn't know what to do. Could he just let the cub go and wait for the bear to catch him? But what if it wasn't the mother? What if he made a fatal mistake? The decision needed to be made. He took a deep breath, taking in every detail around him. The cold wind made his skin burn, and the snow began to fall more intensely. Time was running out. But before he could react, something even more surprising happened. A bear growled again, but this time not for the puppy. The sound was different, more intense, a warning. And then, a second sound came. A sound that made the protagonist realize that they were being watched all the time. Someone, or something, was there with them, hidden between the trees. If you followed every moment of this intense story, I want to know, what did you feel when the cub finally found its mother? Comment, "Protective bear," and share your excitement. Your participation helps bring this story to more people who love journeys of rescue and overcoming. And if you haven't left your like yet, this is the moment. Your support strengthens this community and ensures more incredible stories reach you. Now, get ready, because the next episode will touch your heart even more. Subscribe to the channel and click on the video that appears on the screen to discover another exciting story that will leave you speechless. The wind was blowing hard, bringing with it a swirl of fine snow that danced in the frigid night air. The protagonist felt his panting breath condense into white clouds in front of his face. His body was tense, his muscles tensed, his heart beating fast inside his chest. The bear cub was still in his arms, breathing faintly but still alive. However, the real danger was not the biting cold or exhaustion. It was there in front of him, in the form of an imposing bear, watching your every movement with deep, dark eyes. The air was charged with tension. Any false step, any wrong gesture could mean the end. The protagonist felt the weight of the bear's gaze on him, analyzing, evaluating. But there was something there that wasn't purely instinctive. There was something different about that connection. The cub, small and vulnerable, moved slightly in the man's arms. His body was still shaking, but his eyes slowly opened. Small, bright, filled with a mixture of tiredness and something deeper. There was no fear. He didn't fight. He didn't try to escape. He didn't struggle. He just looked at the protagonist as if he was understanding, as if he was accepting his presence there. And then, something unexpected happened. The bear moved. His immense body swayed slightly, shifting the snow around him. Every step he took made the ground shudder beneath his weight. She raised her head, sniffing the air, slowly approaching. The protagonist felt his entire body lock up instinctively. If she attacked, there would be no escape. There was nowhere to run, there was no time to react. But she didn't attack. Instead, the bear stopped a few meters away, let out a low sound, a short but non-threatening growl, and lowered her head. His eyes were fixed on the cub. The little bear moved again, letting out a faint sound, a low moan that echoed in the silent forest. The connection between them was undeniable. The protagonist knew, at that moment, that that was the baby's mother. What to do now? He had risked his life to save that little being. He had fought against the snow, the cold, and the collapse of the cave. Now, should he just let it go? Could I trust that that bear didn't pose a threat? He took a deep breath. His fingers were numb from the cold, and the weight of the puppy in his arms seemed heavier by the second. But it was the right thing to do. With slow, calculated movements, he crouched slightly, bringing the cub closer to the ground. The little bear, despite his weakness, made a slight effort to move, stretching his trembling paws towards the bear. The protagonist's heart raced when he saw his mother take another step forward. The cub let out a short sound, almost like a call, and then, as if he had finally found the strength he needed, tried to get up alone. He staggered, almost falling, his still fragile paws slipping in the snow. But the bear came even closer and, with a surprising gesture of delicacy for such an immense animal, put his nose to the puppy. The protagonist held his breath. That moment was simply unbelievable. The cub, now supported by the comforting presence of its mother, seemed refreshed. His eyes blinked slowly, but his expression had changed. There was no longer fear, uncertainty, or despair. There was something different there. Gratitude. In the eyes of that little bear, who minutes ago was on the verge of death, there was gratitude. The protagonist felt a tightness in his chest. For a moment, he forgot the cold. He forgot the danger. He forgot everything. The only thing that mattered was that moment. The bear moved away slightly, creating space for the cub to sit beside her. He was still weak, but he was safe, and the protagonist knew that his mission had been accomplished. But before he could react, the bear looked back at him. This time, something was different. His eyes carried no threat. They carried no fury. There was an understanding there, something silent but deep, as if somehow she knew what that human had done. As if, for a brief moment, the barriers between species simply didn't exist. She remained like that for a few seconds, just watching. Then, with one last look, slowly turned around and began walking into the forest, with the cub following in his footsteps. The protagonist remained there, kneeling in the snow, watching as the silhouettes of the two bears disappeared into the darkness. He couldn't say how long he stood there. His mind tried to process what had just happened, but nothing seemed real. He had witnessed something that defied everything we knew about wild nature. And then, silence took over the forest again. But something inside him had changed forever. If you made it this far and felt the same emotion as this story, I want you to comment "animal gratitude" here in the comments. It helps me know you're following along and looking forward to what comes next. And if you haven't left your like yet, now is the time. Your support is essential for more people to learn about incredible stories like this. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode, because this journey isn't over yet. The darkness of the forest seemed thicker now, and the cold still cut like sharp blades. But there was something different in the air. The protagonist remained kneeling in the snow, watching the footprints that slowly disappeared between the trees covered in white. The mother bear and her cub were heading back to the safety of the forest. The little one, previously fragile and about to succumb to the cold, now walked beside her, still wobbly but firm. Every step he took was a victory over the fate that had almost consumed him. The protagonist still felt the residual warmth of the little bear in his arms. For a moment, that helpless being had depended entirely on him. He had felt her weak breath against his chest, heard her heartbeat slowing down, almost giving up. But now, against all odds, the cub was alive. And not just alive, but safe. The bear, imposing and serene, walked slowly, casting quick glances behind her, making sure the cub was following closely behind her. The little one tried to keep pace, his small paws sinking into the soft snow with each step. The protagonist noticed that, despite being exhausted, the puppy was determined to continue. There was a new sparkle in his eyes, something that wasn't there when he found it in that icy cave. But then, something happened. The bear stopped. The cub, stumbling a little, also stopped. And to the protagonist's surprise, the little bear looked back. That look, it wasn't a look of fear. It wasn't a look of uncertainty. It was something much deeper. In that puppy's eyes, there was recognition. There was something about that moment that seemed almost human, as if he knew, as if he understood in some way what that stranger had done for him. He could have simply followed his mother without looking back, disappeared into the cold night like any other wild animal would. But no, he stopped. For a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. The little bear stayed there, staring at the protagonist. His eyes, once weak and filled with fear, now carried something different. Was it gratitude? The protagonist felt a lump in his throat. He knew that nature was cruel, that animals followed their instincts, and that, in the end, it all came down to survival. But at that moment, all of this seemed small compared to the intensity of that gaze. And then, as if wanting to leave his own mark on that unforgettable moment, the puppy did something that no one expected. He took a step towards the protagonist. The mother bear remained still, watching, without intervening. The cub staggered slightly, his strength still limited, but he persisted. One more step, then another. Every little movement was loaded with meaning. He stopped a short distance from the protagonist, hesitated for a moment, and then lowered his head. The protagonist felt his heart accelerate. That was a gesture of trust. The little bear took a deep breath, let out a short sigh, and then turned back to his mother. With one last look, he finally walked away, following the bear deeper into the forest. The protagonist remained motionless. He knew he had just witnessed something rare, something many would never believe if he told them. But he didn't need proof. That moment would remain etched in him forever. The snow continued to fall gently, covering the little bear's footprints as he disappeared into the darkness of the forest. The cold wind was still blowing, but now it seemed less cruel, as if nature, for a brief moment, had allowed a miracle. If you made it this far and felt this connection as strong as I did, comment "The power of connection" here in the comments. It helps me know that you are along for the ride on this incredible journey. And if you haven't left your like yet, now is the time. Your support is essential for more people to know stories like this. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode, because this story isn't over yet. The snow continued to fall, slow and silent, covering every footprint left by the little bear and his mother, as they disappeared into the darkness of the forest. The protagonist remained motionless for a few moments, his gaze fixed on the void where, just a few seconds ago, he could still see the outlines of the two animals moving away. The cold was still intense, the biting wind still howled through the trees, but inside him, something was different. He felt an inexplicable heat, something that didn't come from the body, but from the soul. That puppy was doomed, lost, alone, trapped in a cave about to collapse. Fate already seemed to have drawn its sentence, and the relentless snow would have erased any sign of its existence. But against all odds, against the brutality of nature and the savage rules that govern the animal world, he survived. And he survived because someone decided to act. How many times do we ignore a call out of fear? How many times do we choose to walk away thinking there is nothing we can do? The protagonist knew that, rationally, he shouldn't have gotten involved. Nature follows its own laws, and intervening could have cost him his life. But at that moment, he didn't just see a bear cub. He saw a fragile life, asking for a chance. This story teaches us something powerful. Even in the darkest moments when all seems lost, a single act of compassion can change everything. It can be the difference between life and death, between oblivion and survival, between despair and hope. What would have happened if he had chosen to ignore that weak cry? We may never know how many lives could be changed if more people chose to act. If only more people would decide to reach out, even when fear tells them to step back. The protagonist now knew this. He had before him living proof that the impossible can happen when there is empathy, courage, and a simple desire to make a difference. But there was something even deeper to this story. The puppy's response. That little bear could have just followed his mother without looking back. He could have disappeared among the trees, without any recognition of what had been done for him. But no, he stopped, he looked, and for a brief moment he reciprocated. And this shows us that compassion is not just a one-way street. It creates invisible bonds between living beings, overcoming species barriers, transcending the natural rules of survival. When we help without expecting anything in return, something powerful happens. Perhaps nature is more complex than we imagine. Maybe animals understand more than we give them credit for. Or maybe, in that moment, in that look, there was something greater. Something that doesn't need words to be understood. This story will forever be marked on the protagonist, but it can also mark you. This story touched your heart the same way it touched mine. I want you to comment. Compassion changes everything here in the comments. Your interaction is essential for more people to learn about this incredible journey. And if you haven't left your like yet, now is the time. Your support strengthens this channel and ensures we can continue sharing heartwarming stories like this. Click the like button and subscribe now so you don't miss the next episode, because this connection between humans and animals still has a lot to reveal. If this story touched your heart and made you feel the strength of compassion, click now on subscribe to watch more exciting moments between humans and animals. Here, each video brings a new journey of survival, overcoming and connections that challenge everything we know about nature. But wait, this story might be over, but the next one is even more surprising. The video that is appearing on the screen now brings an unbelievable new rescue that you need to see. Click and get ready for another exciting story that will touch your heart.